G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder. Today we're going to be taking a look at a vehicle that was updated during the last patch, patch 2.1. The AMX-30B2 BRENUS is notorious for being a pretty terrible vehicle. However, over the last patch it got an APS upgrade where it actually gets an APS. It's the lowest battle rating APS in the game, and it is the second tank to be equipped with APS. You can sit kind of working here with that BMP missile sort of going everywhere, and it's kind of cool. It's a neat little gimmick. Unfortunately, it doesn't really prevent the mainstay of your opponents, and as you can see, I get taken out by a T-44, but I'll sort of explain this a little bit later in a bit more depth. So the AMX-30B2 BRENUS, we've always known it to be a pretty bad tank, and in fact years and years ago I put a video up on the channel and it was titled something like Suicide is cool, but have you ever tried the B2 BRENUS? Basically implying that this vehicle is a masochist's vehicle, and it really is. Giving it the APS is a nice little touch. It's cool. I like it. I think it's a great addition to the game. It's not going to make the BRENUS particularly competitive though, and whilst some may say that's okay, I'm a little bit hesitant because I really, deep down, I want every single vehicle to be competitive and viable. Although, let's be real, we're kind of chasing a rainbow here. So, with the BRENUS, what exactly is its problem? Well, it's very simple. It doesn't have a stabilizer, and stabilizers are king at this battle rating. Doesn't matter what you have. You could be slinging heat of fest, but if you have a stabilizer, at least you have a chance. Things like the M551 Sheridan are actually not too bad. The one thing that holds, say, the Sheridan back is the reload rate. The thing that holds the BRENUS back, however, is the way you have to play it. Unfortunately, it's not a good tank because of the situations that you are allowed to get yourself into where you are able to get away with something. So, in, say, the Leopard 1, this is an L44 that I'm fighting right here. Basically, because he's got mobility, because he's got a lot of firepower, because he's got thermals, the L44 can take on a few roles. You can flank, and you can get people from the side. You can sit up on top of a hill and snipe. Alternatively, in some cases, you could even try a little bit of close-in engagement. Although in the Leopard, I probably wouldn't recommend that. Although, in saying that, there aren't many tanks at this battle rating that you can comfortably brawl with in order to not get shot at. So you do have plenty of options in terms of your Leopard 1 L44. You can basically do whatever the hell you want, with the exception of drive down the middle and try not to get shot that way. So, what can the BRENUS do? And there's really only one or two things. The BRENUS can sit back and snipe, and this is exactly what I'm doing here. This is a notorious spot on this particular map, Jungle, where you have a good vision on the opponent's cap. Not only that, but you can also get a good look at the C cap, and here we go again. I'm going to be taking another missile. This time it's from an Alouette. Now, you might have wondered why the APS didn't trigger, and that's because the APS is looking straight ahead. The APS does not increase in attitude, so you can't dazzle, say, an Alouette's missiles from far away if it is not basically level with the horizon. And that is a real problem. Another thing you can't do with the APS is disrupt things like Nords, and you'll see plenty of Nords in this battle rating. So if you're telling me this, then why would I be recommending this tank? Well, I can't really recommend it, but how would you play it? And the answer is very simple. You kind of have to have your opponents come to you. And whilst for many people that's actually not a bad way to play the game, personally it's not really a great way for me. I don't particularly enjoy it, and I don't think a lot of the player base would particularly enjoy sort of waiting for your opponents to drive out into the open as such. However, you can make this work. It's not something that is impossible, and it's not something that you can just never accomplish. I am going to do it in this battle. One thing that this tank does have is, first of all, Gen 1 gunner thermals. It doesn't have commander thermals, and for me, I'm still of the opinion that commander thermals are way more valuable than gunner thermals. Personally, the way I go about playing the game, they're a little bit more valuable to me, and I see that as the case. I understand if you think that gunner thermals are a little bit more valuable, but for me it's really those commander thermals, because I spot my target first, and then sometimes the resolution of the thermals aren't that great, so I can't really tell where the opponent is. I can't tell if it's engine smoke I'm looking at, things like that. And the commander thermals is the thing that sort of lets me spot them in the first place. I do this with, say, my CV9120, which I'm starting to learn and I actually kind of like. It's kind of got everything, but it's also got a stabilizer and it's got a killer round. The BRENUS kind of has that, just minus the stabilizer, and of course minus the infrared warning system, which the laser warning system. Sorry, I think that's a really cool touch to the game. The Dazzler, or the APS, is really cool, but it doesn't necessarily make the BRENUS a bit any more competitive. You still have to sort of play this sneaky type gameplay, and once in a while, you know what, I kind of enjoy that. But having your enemies come to you is not always the greatest way to play the game. Now, I do understand that the BRENUS isn't all that bad. It does have a couple of little tricks up its sleeve. You can see here I've actually got a decent amount of mobility. Not as much as the Leopard and not as much as other AMX-30s, because you do have, I believe it's Blazer ERA, basically bolted to the front and the side of the turret and the front of the hull there. And yeah, naturally that weighs your opponent or your tank down a little bit. However, you know, it can be useful in a few situations. Here I'm in an engagement with what I thought was a BMP and some sort of MBT like a T62, but it turns out it's an Object 906, and I'm very, very lucky that I ran down the hill like that. So I'm going to pop myself up a little bit, and the T95E1 is kind of going to be my meat shield here, unfortunately, and I figure out it's a 906, so I managed to pop him with an APF SDS shell. I'm really sorry, Mr. T95E1. I'm really sorry. That's just... I hate having to leave people die like that. It really makes me upset. Because I know how it feels. Because I've had it done to me before, and I've done it to people, and that's not the last time. But if you are in a situation like that, maybe try and flank to avoid repetition of what I managed to do. You might end up saving your friendly, and you never know. An extra friendly is really, really important in the game. So, what I've done here is I've taken the cap, and I'm really afraid to move out because I need to be aware of everything in my surroundings in order to move up to make sure there's no enemy around that can sort of take me out really quickly. And just as I get off the cap, a T44 and a BMP-1 come straight through. I can see the BMP-1, I can't see the T44-100, so I'm assuming the T44-100 was the one in the cap because he killed the, he killed the Leopard. And it turns out they're both really close. They're right behind that ZTZ-59D1 rack, or wreck, sorry. I turn off the thermals again just to give me a little bit more resolution as to what I'm seeing, and I managed to mow down the BMP-1 with the 20mm. That is one of the aces up the BRENUS' sleeve. Basically every AMX-30 except the premium one gets that 20mm, and it's really, really good. I think both AMX-30s don't get that 20mm. Correct me if I'm wrong on the Super, because I have played the Super and I own the Super, but I can't quite remember. And there we go again. ERA might stop heat FS, APS might stop ATGMs, but T44 APHE is always going to punch a hole through your tank and kill you in one shot. So take that as you will. Now this next game really, in my opinion, just shows you how limited the BRENUS is in its playstyle. You can get pinned down, and this is what I'm going to get. I'm going to be basically pinned down all of this match, and you're going to see just about how limited this thing is in its viability. Most tanks actually have a fairly decent window of viability where you can use them in more than 2 or 3 situations, but unfortunately the BRENUS is that one kind of tank that needs to be shooting at enemies that aren't looking at it, otherwise it will get shot first. There's no way that you can stop and fire in time, because the stabilizer will always beat you, and that's wherein lies the majority of our problems in the BRENUS. So what can you actually do? There's one little thing that Gaijin can do, and that is add a stabilized gun sight. Now, what exactly does this mean? So in real life, the AMX-30s had a gun sight that was perfectly stabilized. They didn't stabilize the gun, which is what most tanks have. They have a stabilized gun and gun sight. However, the AMX-30, or the French thought they'd be a little bit special, and they decided to have a stabilized gun sight but not a stabilized gun. Maybe because they thought it would be easier, maybe because they thought it'd be... I don't know. But regardless, that's the way that they've worked. So when you actually go to fire a shell in your AMX-30 in real life, you don't tap the fire pedal or the fire button or whatever it is. You basically hold it down and wait for, I guess, the computer or whatever it is on board to measure when the gun is perfectly level with your scope, and then it fires. So I think having that in-game model would be really nice. It would add a little bit more viability to the AMX-30s, and I think we could all agree that that would be a little bit better. It would kind of make it a little bit more competitive. I don't know how amazing it would make it, but regardless, I still think the BRENUS is just lacking a little bit in that department there, where it doesn't quite have that level of competition. It's still a nice addition, it's still a cool tank, and it's still great to have in War Thunder. Don't get me wrong, I would just love every tank to have a little bit more viability, especially those that aren't really well loved, like the BRENUS. It's really sad, to be honest. It's just one of those things that I'd really like to see added to the game. Anyway, another thing that you could potentially add is the AMX-30, I think it was the C2, which is basically an analog to the AMX-30 Super. I think it's still got the same 20mm. It's basically an AMX-30B2 with a stabilizer, from what I know. I think that would be kind of cool. Maybe it has a couple of avionics upgrades, I'm not really sure, but it is a cool concept, and I think I would like to see that in War Thunder. Obviously, having more tanks at this battle rating would be kind of nice. And another thing I would like to see at the moment is for the AMX-30B2 to be down at 8.3. I think it's a bit of a side grade compared to the AMX-30B2 because it's a little bit heavier. Granted, it does have APS, but that mobility really does hinder it. And for me, mobility is a really important part of my MBTs at this sort of tier, especially with things like the Leopard, the Type 74, things like the XM1 just a little bit higher up, the MBT-70s just a little bit higher up, the TAMs, Big Light Panzers, all the APCs, and the light tanks. It would really be nice to have a little bit more mobility in the, or a little bit more recognition that the extra armor, which doesn't really help too much against APF-SDS, which is the meta round, it would kind of help it to sort of retain a little bit more viability, and I think that's not a bad thing in the slightest. So just a little clip here. I've got a Type 69, which is very nice. I've taken out a couple of things. He doesn't really see me, and he doesn't have the gun depression, which is most important. Boom, there he goes. It's a T-55A, never mind, not nice. T-55As are very, very scary creatures. Honestly though, overall, the BRENUS is a lot of fun. It's very challenging. Once you do get the hang of it, it's not too bad, but honestly, it's nothing competitive, and I don't expect it to be anytime soon. It having APS is great fun. I think that is a fantastic addition. Although, let's be real, it's not really going to do a whole lot against APF-SDS. I don't actually know if there is an APS that deals with discarding Saber rounds like that. I would be interested to know in the comment section, because you guys are a lot more knowledgeable on that sort of stuff than I am. But it's really cool actually to see a lot of modern technologies come to the game. I don't really know many other modern technologies that, say, tanks have that could come to the game. I think if you know any, of course, let me know. I did read up actually that there was an interesting SPAA that the Russians were developing. It has a 57mm cannon. It doesn't have radar though. It uses thermals to basically sight the tank gun. To me, that's incredibly innovative. I would absolutely love to see it. It's basically a 57mm cannon on a BMP, and it kind of looks like the HSTVL's cannon, but in a 57mm caliber and Russian. It probably has VT shells, knowing the Russians and knowing the technology of today. And I think interesting technologies like that are more than welcome in the game, provided that they're balanced. Things like, helicopters need a little bit more fine-tuning. And speaking of helicopters, the AMX-30B2 BRENUS is actually not too bad at dealing with helicopters. Considering that it has the ERA, it has the 20mm, it has a laser rangefinder, it has dart, and of course it has that APS if the enemies are deciding to launch ATGMs at ground level, then that's going to be their funeral. So you have a couple of little weapons at your disposal. Not only that, but your 8.7 So you're not going to face anything too serious that has Hellfires. Maybe the Mangusta, which is, I think it's 9.7. It might be 10.0. If it has Hellfires, it probably should be 10.0, let's be real. But the AMX-30B2 is actually fairly decent at handling helicopters. Things like the H1G, it can pretty much take out without much of an issue. The Alouettes, like I showed you earlier in the video, it can do that without much of an issue. In fact, a lot of the aircraft that you might face as well are going to have the same sort of fun times fighting you if they come in at a low enough angle. The only thing that you're really going to struggle against is MBTs, and honestly, for me, that's where the BRENUS sort of loses its viability. As I said, you shouldn't engage people from the front, and that's exactly what I do here, and get myself killed, which serves me absolutely right. So, in summary, the AMX-30B2 BRENUS is fun. It's definitely very challenging, and it's definitely not for the faint of heart, but if you really enjoy a challenge, and if you want to try out the APS, I would say go for it, honestly. It's the French tech tree in general is quite good. There are a couple of additions to the French tree that could be coming fairly soon that I think would be incredible. Not only that, but you have fairly decent cast. You have the Oregon, as you are seeing here. Plenty of good weaponry. You also have the Alouette. You have a couple of lower tier stuff. You've got the 84, which I probably wouldn't take out at this battle rating, considering that there are plenty of Gepards everywhere. You've also got the F4U7, which is also fairly strong in that regard. Anyway, ladies and gents, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed some tank content. I haven't done a lot of tank content recently, but I have been getting into tanks again. Remember that I still do play tanks, and I still grind tanks. But yeah, the BRENUS is kind of good. It's okay. It's nothing too special. It's not particularly competitive, but it's challenging, and it's fun, and I think that's where it really shines. To me, it kind of like sums up War Thunder in a single tank. It's all bling, but no actual competitive goodness, which makes me a little bit sad, but at the end of the day, I still love it. Anyway, ladies and gents, thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you next time.